delivering food, delivering spiritual food, and delivering real food. Not necessarily with Uber. I don't represent Uber. Okay, I'm sorry I have to do this again. You guys that were watching earlier, I don't know when I cut out, but I cut out somehow. But I want to talk about people leaving the faith. And this is because we have there's this book that I'm listening to as I'm delivering food called "You Lost Me." I forget the name of the author, but it's a great book. I mean, it just gives a perspective about why there's so many people leaving the church, so many young kids leaving the church. Specifically, 63% of kids that grow up in Christian homes leave the church, and many of them don't ever come back. Why is that happening? I think there's a difference between leaving the church and Christianity, but let's just assume I mean, we do need to include them too. But I think that this will be relevant for both of them. But why do people leave? And there's a couple of reasons. I think the main thing when we're talking about this is territorialism. But before I do that, there's a few people to mention that I think are really important. There's a guy from Hillsong named Marty Samson. I don't know if you've heard of him, but Marty Samson back in 2019, and he left the church. I think he completely left the faith. Yeah, he did. He completely left the faith, and said it was the science and problem of evil, those kind of things. You also had Joshua Harris. Joshua Harris left the faith back, maybe it was 2017. I don't know when that was, but it was around the same time. And that was really sad. I mean, I like Joshua Harris a lot, and I followed that quite closely. But why do people leave? Whenever somebody famous leaves the faith, you always ask the question again. There's another guy that's I think is just interesting because he is a guy from he was a songwriter as well. His name is Bert Robertson, and he wrote the song "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." "Come Thou Fount" is one of my favorite songs. Maybe one of your favorite songs too. I mean, it's a great song. It's the song that says, "Prone to wonder, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love." And I think in some sense it's very ironic because he became a Unitarian. At least that's the rumor, that he became a Unitarian. So in that sense, it very much did leave the God he loved. And it's very sad. Every time I hear that song now, after I heard that he became a Unitarian, it's hard on me. Still love the song. But people leave the faith. And you always ask the question, why do people leave the faith? I read books. I've read so many books about people leaving the faith, not because I'm trying to be smart about it, but because I used to be really scared about it. I used to be scared about leaving the faith. I wouldn't have admitted that at the time. I would have just said, well, I'm trying to help other people. But deep down inside, there was an insecurity that I had that thought, why would people leave Christianity? What do they know that I don't know? That kind of thing. And so I was scared about it. So I read a lot of books about people leaving the faith. And I've thought about this my whole life. I deal with people who doubt quite a bit. You've probably heard me talk about doubt all the time, and I do. Because I went through significant doubt in 2010. I never left the faith. I never left the God I love. My theology was always there, but it was a very, very difficult time emotionally for me for a long time. But so I help people that are doubting the faith, doubting their faith, and thinking they're going to leave the faith. But why do people leave? I want to give a couple of reasons, and I think it's all underneath this umbrella of what's called territorialism. Territorialism within the church has to do with our church is the be-all to everything. Our individual church, this building that we have built, these people that come here, we will provide everything that anybody needs. And we're better than any of the other churches down the street. This is very much the case in Oklahoma. We're very territorial. I was told that a long time ago, and I didn't understand what the guy meant, but now I do. We are very. Each church is isolated. We don't see ourselves as part of the bigger church. We may express a theology and say, I believe in the church universal, the big C church, that we are all the body of Christ, but we don't act it out very well. We don't really have that in our practical, daily doing church type stuff in our teachings as well. It's not integrated into we don't think of ourselves as part of the bigger church. Pastors don't know each other. They don't meet up and try to strategize and figure out how to best serve the city. They have big conferences sometimes, but really getting down to the nitty gritty of how to affect our community, our city of Oklahoma City, in this case, they don't do that. They try to be the be all. Everybody tries to be the be all to everything that church needs. And they get offended whenever people leave because they're territorial. People leave there many times because they need something different. Well, church is a building. Church, we ask the question sometimes, what is church? Is church a building? Is church something that we do or something that we are? Is church a building, something that we do, or something that we are? In other words, is our church, when we talk about it, the church that we go to? The four walls that are built there, is that the church? That's what we think most prominently when we talk about church. Unfortunately, that's what we think most prominently. Or is it something that we do, just fellowship, so we can do church without ever going to church? And we might say, well, the Bible never says to go to church. It just says gather together with other believers, and we gather together in many different ways. But what about the leadership roles and the authority and submission that we're supposed to have within a church? We have to have structure for that. So church is something that we go to, and it is something that we do, but it's mostly something that we are. We are the body of Christ. We are the church. We are always the church. Whether you're going to church or not, you are the church. We go to church because it provides an avenue of expression for our need for fellowship, our command for fellowship, and also for our expression of ourselves, the expression of spiritual gifts, the ability to help other people, all kinds of reasons. So church is something that we go to, that we are, and that we do all of these things. And we need to be integrating that into everything that we do with church. Now, having said that how does territorialism work within this? Well, every church, every city, every place has a church that does something well that another church doesn't do well. Like, we've got a church here in Oklahoma City that does evangelism very well. And that's where I'd send somebody if they needed to come to know Christ, if they needed to hear the gospel very plainly. The gospel is preached every single week. I know where to send them. If somebody that I'm talking to, they need more theology, I know where to send them. There's a church that does theology. Not that many churches that do theology very well anymore, but there is a church that does theology. There's a church that does the Bible really well, just the Bible. There's a church that does worship really well. There's a church that does tradition very well. And I find as I get older, the different points in your life, you kind of need different things. Yes, we commit to an individual church whenever we're young, and we commit to it because that's what we needed at the time. But sometimes we need something different later on. And the church's doors need to be open so that we can go and find something different. The pastor needs to say, hey, listen, I think now you need to really dig deep in theology. So I want you to leave this church, my church, and go to a different church. You would never have that. There's not the community of churches. Whenever Paul talked about the church, whenever he wrote to the church at Corinth or the church at Thessalonica, it was the church at Corinth, not the First Baptist Church at Corinth. And I know there's more to it than that. I'm being simplistic, but at the same time, we need to think of these implications about how we do church and how we kind of are overly protective. Whenever you're overly protective, you do have the tendency for people to break free. And the old saying, if you love someone, set them free. That is true. You got to set people free, and not only just set them free, but really, really be involved enough to know what they need at the time, when they need it. And so that is the first thing. I think our perception of the church, what the church is not helpful sometimes. I'm not saying we do everything wrong at all. I'm just saying with regard to this is something that we can correct. There needs to be a fellowship of churches. Pastors need to take on a different attitude about what they are there for, how they serve the community. We're not the be all the time. And sometimes people do need different things. But most importantly is the foundational level. And this has to do with the kind of territorialness that we bring into the home and to the family. And you have kids growing up who are primed to leave the faith because in the family they were overly protective. And this will happen every time. I mean, they'll break free and they may come back later on, yes, but the studies are showing that most people aren't coming back anymore. And that's really sad. I think that's the alarming thing. And so what do we do in the family in order to keep people to help them through their problems, their doubts, whatever it is that they may experience? We have to do this very, very early. And what you do is when they grow up, you have to teach them the foundational elements of Christianity that you believe. And you're going to do that. I'm not saying not to do that and say, right whenever they're, 5 years old and you're telling them about Jesus, you're trying to make them understand the other options. But at some point, you have to open the door for them to leave. I love a story that was told by Billy Graham about him and his son. Him and his wife and his son, and they were talking to his son about Jesus, and they said, "Oh God, what is his name?" Franklin Graham. He said, "Franklin, we are Christians here, and we love Jesus, and we hope someday you do too." And that really hit me. I don't know why it hit me so much, but it was just kind of the attitude of openness that says, "You're gonna do this. You're gonna explore, and I hope you come back," type thing. And I think that's kind of the attitude sometimes we need to have with regard to our children and rearing them in the faith. We have to prepare them for the doubts that they're gonna have. Then this means even instigating the doubts ourselves. This means, once they start getting older and get to a point, 13, 14, 15 years old, I don't know. It was different for all my children, and you can tell once they start really thinking on their own and asking questions, that you really instigate and help them through those questions. And you help them understand where you are at, what the problems are that we have with our faith. What are the things that we need to change? What are the doubts that you have within certain doctrines? Those kind of things. And you ask them questions. I remember one time, and you may have heard me tell this story, but it's a great story because my daughter did so great with this. But she was only like 9 years old or 8 years old. She was probably the earliest one of my kids. Caitlin was the earliest one of my kids to really start thinking critically. But whenever we were driving down the road to school, I was taking her to school. She said, "Wait a minute, Dad, I forgot my pencil." And I said, "Well, listen, don't you think God can?" God can, and I'm not trying to present myself as the hero of the story. Now I'm presenting myself as a good example, where I tell everybody never to present yourself as a good example. I don't mean to do this. I'm trying to I don't know. I'm trying to present myself as a good example. This stinks. But anyway, so I said, "Caitlin, we believe in God. Don't you think he can bring the pencil to you? He can create anything. He can do anything. So why don't you pray really hard right now? I'll do it with you. Let's pray that God makes the pencil appear so that we don't have to turn around and go get it." And she said, "Okay." And so we both prayed. And I asked her, "Did the pencil appear?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, listen, I don't think God exists anymore because of that." And she said, "Well, Dad, If he didn't exist, the pencil wouldn't exist in the first place. I thought that was so good. Such a great answer. So I always tell this story bragging on Caitlin, but now I'm the hero of this story. I don't mean to be. But anyway, so you start the questions yourself. You start pushing them in the direction of every way in which they can doubt later on. This does two things. This, number one, helps them wrestle with hard issues. But number two, and I think most importantly, it says to them that you know about these issues. You are not ignorant to the doubts. You are not naive, but you still believe. And if these questions exist in your mind, if they are real questions, if they are real concerns, but you still are committed, why is it you're still committed? And so it's such a great example because it basically says you're pushing your child in the direction that makes them really, really think and graduate from a faith that you gave them to a faith of their own. And you've got to let them do this. Your front door has to be open as well. You have to push them and say, why do you think ours is right and other people's is wrong? And you let them discuss it, and then you discuss it why you think that. It's you are instigating all the questions initially, and you are giving them, just like Billy Graham gave Franklin Graham the opportunity to leave. And I know that's scary. It really is. It's a scary thing to talk, because we want to be protective. We want to be isolationists. We want to be territorial as well. And it's a big problem. If we loosen our grip on these types of things, they will become stronger. They won't. Just the opposite will happen of what we think will happen. But anyway, so I think these are a couple of primary things that we have to deal with: territorialism in the church and territorialism in the family. And I would think that would really help in the problem of people leaving the faith. I haven't gotten through this entire book yet, but I thought, these are the thoughts that I'm having right now. So I thought I'd do an Uber Theologian, because I just drove 20 miles to deliver somebody's food. And by the way, if you order something if you order food from someplace far away, just be sure to tip the person accordingly, because I'm starting to realize I didn't tip people very well whenever I were to order far away, and they don't get paid very well if you don't do it. So tip somebody good, so at least so they can pay for the gas and don't go into the negative delivering your food. Anyway, this is the Uber Theologian. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.